I am indeed Sasha Endo. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the founder of Endo Collaborative. I don't think I need to repeat what you just said about the fact that we make accessible, performant, and engaging websites for nonprofits, for progressive organizations, and purpose-driven businesses. But I repeated it anyway because that might be helpful for folks who will be watching this elsewhere. I've had my hand in basically every piece of the website making sausage, as it were. And the thing that we always come upon is that we can do our best as designers and developers to make an accessible website, but ultimately maintaining that accessibility is up to the content managers for the duration of that website's lifetime. So this is a variation of the talk that I give to our clients, so they can do that easily. Because accessibility does kind of sound scary to a lot of people. It can feel overwhelming, and from a content management perspective, it doesn't have to be. There's probably a lot of things that you're doing already that are making your content a lot more accessible. And there might be some things that, with just a little bit of training, you will be perfectly capable of doing as well. So the things we're going to talk about today are structuring your content, writing it, formatting it, what accessible links look like, how to make them accessible, how to make images and media accessible, and if we have time, a little bit about design, not so much like UI design, but really design that you as a content manager might be engaged in. If you would like to follow along with some of the demos I'll be doing, you can fire up your computer, go to a page on a website that you manage, and maybe use that as an experimental area for you to try these things. If not, there's also the WordPress Playground, which I'll be using for demoing some of these features and functionalities. It just basically spins up a blankish version of WordPress where you can explore functionalities without it being public, without it being on a website that maybe you don't want people to see your experimentations on. Does anyone want to see that URL a bit longer, or are we good to go? Yes.
I pulled it up on my phone. It says it's been suspended.
That is unlikely, but it is .net.
Oh, yeah, good.
Thanks for suggesting that. Good to know. Okay, I think we're probably good to go. Great. All right, so we're going to start with the structuring content piece. And the first thing we're going to talk about are headings. So in structural HTML, so that's the code piece, there are headings 1 through heading 6 that actually make up the structure or the outline of your page. Kind of like when you're writing an essay for school, you're going to have your headings that are really an outline of that essay. Or you can also think about it as a table of contents. And the reason why thinking about it as a table of contents might be helpful is because someone who's accessing your website using assistive technology, like a screen reader, can actually navigate a page using headings alone. And that makes sense. You don't necessarily want to read the whole page word by word until you know that what's on there is relevant to what you're looking for, and then maybe zoom into that specific section and learn more. So the thing to do here is you don't want to skip levels. So the levels are H1 is your page title, H2 is going to be for your sections within that title, within that page, H3 is going to be for subsections, H4 subsections, and so on and so forth. We don't really see headings 5 and 6 used very often, and that's okay. It means you probably have a very complex page, and at that point you might want to break it into further pages. But skipping levels makes it difficult to understand the structure of your page from that bird's eye view. So you don't want to do that. Sometimes it happens because a content manager is really trying to use the tool to its best ability. So maybe you have some text you really want to highlight visually, and you know that a heading of a certain level is going to give you that formatting. So you're going to use the heading block rather than using actually just styling tools that exist within WordPress. Kudos, you found a shortcut, but it actually alters the structure of your document, which makes it less accessible. Another thing that's great about a lot of these recommendations, it's also good for SEO. So you keeping the structure clear is good for search engines because they understand what's going on your page a lot better. So to show you something really cool that WordPress has, I'm going to go to edit this page. Great. And if we head over to the document overview, probably everyone's familiar with the list view. This is where the blocks are that make up your page. But the outline is extra super helpful because there's the outline of your page using just the headings. And you can get a really good idea of, is it well organized? Does it make sense? Are there things in there that shouldn't be headings? And just to show you also on the right-hand side here, something like there's a heading. We know it's a heading. It's an H2. You can change a level to H3 very easily. Usually we're not going to use an H1 in the body of your document because that's reserved for the page title. But other than that, you're good to use all the other headings in order. So if you're at H3, for example, the subsection within that section would use an H4, not an H5 right away. That would be skipping headings. And if you're going back up to a broader section, then you would go to an H2. And you see how over here on the left-hand side, now it's highlighting to me that this heading is actually incorrect level. Super helpful of WordPress. Okay. So the next thing is we want to make the content easy to scan through, or another way to put that is easy to scroll through and understand what's on the page. Headings are already a great way to do that. That means you can easily understand what's on the page. Also using shorter paragraphs, generally speaking. We kind of want to avoid the wall of text effect. So we're breaking things down into more manageable pieces. We want to use lists, headings, shorter paragraphs, shorter sentences in general, maybe images here and there. So something like this, is easier to scan through or scroll through than if it was just a whole bunch of text in paragraphs. If you can imagine, 3 items that are written as a paragraph, that's harder to scan through and understand than when they're actually listed as a list. And you'll see there's some helpful formatting here if that is indeed helpful, but we'll talk about formatting in a second. In terms of writing your content, I'm not going to tell you really how to write it. That's your job. You're probably wonderful at it. But a thing to remember is that the general reading comprehension level of your content should be around grade 8, unless you're writing for a group of people who have very specific technical knowledge. In that case, sure, it makes sense to use the language that they're most familiar with, but in most cases, grade 8 is a wonderful place to be for most websites out there. This means, again, shorter sentences, not using jargony language. There's a really great tool that I love to use, aptly named Hemingway, because of course Hemingway's writing was very succinct and to the point. And you'll see over here on the right-hand side, it lets you know the grade readability score. 9 is okay, 8 is better, and highlights the different sentences and if they are too hard to read, some weakeners, etc., that you can improve. So you can just copy the content of your page, paste it in, and it'll do the same for you. Next is don't use content cues that rely on color, shape, or relative location. So if you say something like, click the red button to the right, that's not really helpful to all of your audiences. Some people might find that helpful, but others who, for example, can't see that it's a button or that it's red, that's not really helpful at all. Websites are flexible, so if on a desktop it's to the right, on mobile it might be below. And maybe if you're using these kinds of cues, it's also an indication that your content's very complex. Why do you need to say which button? How many buttons are there? Maybe fewer buttons would be better. So let's talk about formatting. And of course, the first thing is you should really limit all caps text as much as possible, if any. Usually we want to make sure that if we are using all caps text, it's maybe part of the user interface more so than the actual writing on the page. And there's a few reasons. Sure, you're a polite Canadian, so you don't be screaming at your audiences. That's one. But technically speaking, something like a screen reader might pronounce all caps text very differently. So older screen readers will read it letter by letter. Imagine having to piece that together as you are being read a website content. Some will just emote words differently if it's all caps. So it's not exactly screaming, but it's still emoting them differently. We also know that folks who are sighted, who might be interacting with all caps text, will often have a more difficult time just reading that text because the letter forms are harder to follow, especially depending on the typography. This is kind of case dependent. But we are used to reading sentence case. That's just a fact. So even if you have really legible, fantastic font where the all caps is easier to read, it's still going to be harder because the letter case is different from what you're normally used to. Then there's the alignment. So a lot of us here are probably writing in English, maybe French. Those are left to right languages, and therefore you want to align them to the left. So when you're talking about paragraphs, longer lines of text, and that's because when we have that nice margin on the left, when we get to the end of the line to the right, it's easy to find the next line. Versus when we are talking about centered text, those lines are going to be starting at different places. It's a lot harder. Caveat, not caveat, also justified text. Not a good idea either. You might think that both of those margins being nice and straight is helpful, but the spacing between words then changes, and our brains like predictability. So when those spacings are different, it's actually harder to read. Now, if you're writing in a right to left language like Farsi or Arabic or Urdu, then you want to do right aligned. Same reasoning. When you get to the end of the line, you want it to be easy to get to the next line. Here's an example of mess. Easy. So on the left-hand side, we have a lot of all caps, we have some formatting, we have bolding, underlining, centered text. And I don't know about you, but my shoulders just immediately clench up when I see that, and I don't really want to read that. But on the right-hand side, things are just so much nicer, so much calmer. You can reasonably read through it. There's some bolding, but it's reasonably spaced out. There's not a lot of formatting included. The text is short. We even have buttons. Fantastic. And the last thing in formatting is the text widths. And oftentimes this is something that will be thought through by your designer and developer. But in WordPress, we are able to change widths of blocks, and that's something to consider. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And the reason why we want to keep in mind the widths. So for example, here's a column block. Let's go to the group. The group is better. There's the align button up here, and you'll have the 3 widths that you see. So this is full. It means it's taking up the full width of the browser. Then there's the wide. It's going to be a little bit less wide. And then there's the none, and that's even more narrow. So the reason why we care about this is I'm sure you've had this experience. You go to a website, maybe you're on a bigger monitor, and there's this line of text. Bless it, it's spanning the whole freaking browser. And when you get to the right, you're looking for the beginning of the next line again. And that's just more complex. Our brains, again, they like a certain width. And that width is actually calculated. It's been tested. It should be 45 to 75, maybe 80 characters long. You'll notice up here I have a little bookmarklet. It says 45 to 75. And when I click on a paragraph, it actually highlights where's that range within that paragraph. So it allows it to be easy to test. Where is that limit for the width of each paragraph that should be on my page? A link to this is available elsewhere. I'll share that with you at the end. But the way to test this, right, is you probably want to look at your content on a really big monitor, maybe just an external monitor that you have at your desk, then your laptop, and then your iPhone. Or sorry, any phone that you have. This way you can make sure that that content width is contained and doesn't offend, as it were. Great. Let's talk about accessible links. So first and foremost, we want to make sure that the link text is meaningful. What do I mean by this? Maybe it's a button, and the button says, read more. What does that mean? What am I reading? Or you have a paragraph, and within the paragraph, the thing that's highlighted and linked says, click here. Very, very helpful. Not at all. So the reason why we want to do this is, as a sighted person, you might be getting a lot of content cues about what you're actually clicking on. But someone who's using assistive technology, like a screen reader, can actually request just the links on the page. So something like this. On the left-hand side, we have the WordPress.com website. On the right-hand side, we have the linked text. So you can reasonably assume what you're going to get when you go to plans and pricing, get started, etc. But if there was a bunch of read mores, that doesn't really tell you anything. So that text that you link needs to make sense outside of any kind of content. Yes. Your links should also be easy to find and discern. So if you have a paragraph that's all black text and you have maybe a link that's dark blue, some folks might be able to find it, others might not. And oftentimes this is a job of a designer, right? Let's have them do that job. But because WordPress does allow you to change colors of buttons, for example, you really should be very mindful of how you use those colors together. Let's do a links demo. So for example, we have a button down here. We can change the colors if we go to the right and look at styles. Make it pink. We can make it black, so on and so forth. We can change what things are linked to. And I'm going to go ahead and unclick this open in a new tab box, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Because we shouldn't be opening any links in an external tab or window automatically. First and foremost, there's a usability issue. When your audience can reasonably make their own decisions, you should not be making those decisions for them. It's their autonomy that we want to protect. Secondly, if someone is, again, visiting your website using assistive technology, just close your eyes and imagine this scenario, right? You've clicked on a link, it's opened in a new tab, but you want to go back to that page you were reading. Do you think it'll be easier if it's not in a new tab and you just click back? Right? Versus having to close a tab or navigate between tabs. This is why we don't recommend this. Is everyone excited about alt descriptions? Yes. It's really wonderful to see alt descriptions become something that's so prevalent online, especially in social media. You know, if you're on Instagram, you see those alt descriptions all the time. But I also feel like we maybe kind of lost the plot. If the alt description is 2 paragraphs long, is it really necessary? Like, did we maybe already convey the meaning within the first sentence? Probably. And of course, it's situationally dependent, but ultimately your alt description should be a phrase or a sentence. That's the length. Let's imagine something like a page that's a scholarship for students to go abroad and study abroad. You're probably going to have an image, something like a happy group of students in front of the Parthenon in Athens. That's your alt description. That's it. You don't need to go deeper. You don't need to describe the position of the sun, everyone's like individual identities, and that's actually a part that can be quite tricky. So if you're working on a website that has a staff page and there's headshots for everyone, it is a kindness to let those people describe themselves so that you are not accidentally misrepresenting or not representing their identities correctly. To live in a world where we can all just be seen the way we want to be seen, what a gift. So I recommend that you just engage those people and let them describe themselves the way they would want to be. Yes, that might be longer than a sentence, but in this case, it actually kind of makes sense. Let's look at, this is a funny thing about this website. If you look at the alt text, it says, and I'm just going to show you the image. So there's the image, it's orange, there's got like an earth logo, and not logo, icon, and some swirly gigs. And the alternative says, e-commerce store concept showing online shopping with cart, products, and digital elements. Yeah, that's not the alt text for this image. I don't know why it is, but you can very clearly see that alt text is a wonderful thing, and sometimes maybe it could be updated. But the thing that I really wanted to show you here is, so we're editing this page currently, and if we changed the alt text in the right-hand side here, that would be specific to this page only. So this is not the global alt text that this image would have throughout the website. And that is a good thing. But if you wanted to, you could go to the media library, upload a file, shall we? Why not? We'll upload a file. Look, it's me. And then you can update the alt text in here, and that will be, in fact, global. So this, anytime this image is used on the website, this is the alt text that will go with it. I would say that if you're using an image multiple times on the same website, you might actually be conveying different meanings every time you use it. So it does make sense to alter that on a page-by-page basis. Another really cool thing about WordPress editing experience, let's find an image, is right below that alternative text box, there's this really helpful link to a decision tree, they call it, of how to write that alt text. So for example, if you have like a purely decorative image, it's, I don't know, it's a visual flourish. It adds zero meaning to the website, to the page. You don't actually have to add alt text because it doesn't add anything for those folks who are not looking at it. But if you do want to add meaning, then you want to describe the meaning. And sometimes it's tempting to add text to our images to add that meaning, but it is not actually a great idea. First and foremost, so when I say embedded text, what I mean is like you may be in Canva or in Photoshop and you have added text and saved that as an image. So all of a sudden, the sighted folks on your website will be able to read that text, assuming the contrast is correct. But the folks who are coming using, again, so technology that is reading the website to them, screen readers don't know how to read text from an image, nor do search engines. So there is always this added kind of benefit of making sure that your website is also doing well for SEO. And if we consider something like an infographic, right? Adding simple alt description that is like a sentence is not going to actually accurately describe what's going on in your infographic. So you definitely want to have alternative ways to describe that. You might have maybe a few paragraphs just in the body of the document, and that's probably going to be helpful to more than just the folks who can't see the image. When we try to communicate complex things with imagery, it just behooves us to have another way to describe it, because we can never be 100% sure that it will be understood the same by everyone. But when I say multimedia, we're talking about also video and audio. And again, wonderful to see that closed captions are a thing that's happening pretty regularly, especially on social media. But also just in YouTube, you can add those closed captions very easily. The thing that doesn't happen as often is having transcripts. So let's say you are not able to view the video and you're not able to hear the video. How will you then be able to engage with it? There's actually a really, really cool device that I encourage you to look up. It gives me joy to know that it exists. It's called a Braille display. And essentially it's like this, not a keyboard, but like this field in front of you where the text on the screen gets converted to Braille so you can touch read it. The coolest thing, in my opinion, that exists. But then, right, so someone who's using that kind of device can actually understand what's happening in a video or in an audio. And, you know, as we're talking about permanent accessibility needs, I'm sure you've been in a situation where it's midnight, you are in bed, you want to watch a video. Maybe you're doing work. I don't know why, but we all do it. And your partner is next to you and they're sleeping and you don't have your headphones next to you. Transcript, solved. You can be a productive cog in the machine at midnight. And the last thing here is about animations. So animations are tricky and really you probably should be working with a developer to integrate them appropriately. If we're talking about something like a video that you're embedding, just make sure that you're not stripping out the controls, because we want to make sure that there's a way to pause and stop, especially if it's longer than 5 seconds. If it's shorter than 5 seconds, maybe you don't need to embed it anyway, question mark. And then if something is flashing on the screen, we want to make sure that it does not flash more than 3 times a second. Just imagine that experience, flashing 3 times a second. And then if you have epilepsy, that's like a real health concern. So a lot of these things are going to be benefited by something like a developer helping you. An example here would be adding a GIF to your website. Yes, I said GIF. We can fight about this later. But you can't really pause and stop a GIF. So think maybe twice before doing that. They are wonderful though. Okay, so we have time. Let's talk about design really quickly. I think probably most of you in this room know to test color combinations for graphics that you are creating if you are creating graphics for your website, or if you're using the WordPress editor and you're changing colors. There is actually a really cool feature where if you change, let's see, if you change the background and the text colors, let's go with purple. See how down here it says color combination may be hard for people to read. So WordPress does care about accessibility, and will let you know when you are edging towards or fully over the edge when it comes to content accessibility contrast. It doesn't do that with buttons, but it does do that in a paragraph. And if you're working with a defined brand, I love this tool because you can just paste in all the colors from your brand and it will make this grid of all the colors up above, all the colors down below, and now you can see which combinations actually pass for specific contrast standards. So there's the AA, WCAG, yes, the AAA, etc. And DNP, that means did not pass. And of course, you want to also test for low vision and colorblind visitors. Color blindness is a thing that often gets overlooked because we kind of think about, well, you can either see things or you can't. But there's also a variation of being able to see things. This tool is really, really cool. You can put any website on the left-hand side. It'll show you what someone who is fully non-colorblind will be able to see. And on the right-hand side, it's a drop-down with various different kinds of color blindness that you can cycle through, and it'll show you what that actually looks like, so you can still see whether the contrast is sufficient. Cool. So I mentioned a lot of tools and things, and on our website we have a bunch of guides for accessibility for content managers, basically the things that I've been talking about, but in written format. Whoops, pardon me. And one of the guides is all the tools that you can use as a content manager. So all linked and easy for you to use. And then we have a handy dandy checklist. It is a PDF. We made sure it's accessible, but you can use that PDF as you're either auditing your own content or writing new content to just make sure you've hit all the recommendations that we've been talking about. And of course, if you want a little extra help, we're happy to train, do audits, or just be there for ongoing accessibility support at endo.co or hello@endo.co. Do folks have questions? Do we have time for questions?
Yeah, we got time.
Amazing.
Who's first to be on?
Yes,
Just wondering if you have a,
we have a microphone.
Sorry. If
Yeah.
you have a table, as far as aligning text left, should it be maintained within that as well? Like no centering headers or anything?
Okay,
like that?
so, I mean, technically, if you have a table, you probably have very short bits of text in there, right? You don't have long paragraphs. So you could get away with it, but you might want to be very consistent then throughout the table, so you're not jumping from one alignment to another alignment to another alignment. And that might also be partially, better for design.
I think when you've got numbers, sometimes it makes sense to center numbers, but not blocks of text as a layout.
If you know that those numbers are never going to get very, very large, sure. But usually when we style tables, from a coding perspective,